what was the driving force was Scott was an energetic force of nature. And it didn't make sense to me that he was just extinguished. So if he wasn't extinguished, or there was the possibility he wasn't extinguished, how might I go about in a method that I was comfortable with, explore? I wasn't interested in crystal balls and turbans and 1-800 hot psychics. That was I couldn't go there.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to another edition of Soul Explorers. Today we have a special guest and a good friend, Cheryl Page. She's a scientist and a medium. And welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Sally. I'm so honored to be here and excited for wherever this is going to go for you guys. I know that the world is in sore need right now of a broader understanding of what is possible. If I can give just a tiny bit of my backstory to bring people up to speed, 6.5 years ago, the love of my life was crossing the highway outside of a town in Colorado, and he was hit by a vehicle and passed away. And at that point in my life trajectory, I was pretty happy to just live in my five senses. That was where I hung my hat, and it was definitely what was comfortable to me. But Scott's passing started me asking questions that I'd never really asked before about what's possible, where do we go when we die. My Catholic upbringing of clouds and harps and halos wasn't really helping me. So, short of a very long story, that's how I ended up where I am now, was asking a lot of questions. And if I could say that, my two most important things that I've learned is, one, don't be a skeptic. It's fine to be discerning. But if you're really going to explore, then skepticism, doubt causes drought. And skepticism really, if you look at the definition of that word, it is laden with disbelief and doubt. As opposed to I realized that I had two categories: true, not true. As a scientist, that was pretty much how I navigated my world. True, not true. But I realized if I was going to stay open-minded, I needed a third category. And that third category is what if? What if it's true? What if it's not? What if this is real? What if it's not? What if I'm crazy? What if I'm not? And that continually, even to today, keeps me open when I bump up against something that I've never encountered before, which in this journey to after-death communication and seances and mediums and all kinds of things that I never would have thought of before. What if keeps me honest in the middle of big questions. And so stay open, don't be a skeptic, be discerning, and just find a strategy. My strategy is what if.
That's what I love about you, Cheryl, is that you stay very curious about what's possible. And it's one of the reasons that I just love listening to you talk about your processes. How do you think you managed to go from that 3D, five senses, scientific mindset to where you became more open to the possibilities? I mean, I know that Scott's transition was the starting point for that, but what in you shifted?
I think that, again, my default setting, for better or worse, is always back to sort of the scientific method. And I just can't help myself, is sort of what it boils down to. So, with the scientific method, you sort of start with a question. Is after-death communication possible? Does our consciousness survive the death of our physical body? So I start with the question. and I just read the data. And really, Sally, what was the driving force was Scott was an energetic force of nature. And it didn't make sense to me that he was just extinguished. So if he wasn't extinguished, or there was the possibility he wasn't extinguished, how might I go about in a method that I was comfortable with, explore? I wasn't interested in crystal balls and turbines and 1-800 hot psychics. That was I couldn't go there. So I asked the question. I read 125 years worth of existing data because I'm that girl. And then I formulated, okay, is this possible for me? Seems like other people say there's anecdotal evidence, there's scientific evidence. Is it possible for me? And then I started experimenting. And my strategy was, what if, yes, but if I don't have to get on CNN and prove it to anybody else, I can just have fun. I don't have to convince anybody else of what I'm experiencing. I just need to experience it. So I ask the question, I start experimenting, and I watch what happens. What is the data saying to me? And in my profession, at some point, if you have a mountain of anecdotal evidence, not double-blind placebo-controlled trials, but if you just have a mountain of evidence, you're irresponsible to ignore that evidence. And at some point, it's not one thing or 5 things or 25 things or 525 things. And at some point, you're in the landslide, the deluge of evidence. My conclusion was, okay, this is real. But, big fat but we aren't, that's the good news. The good news to me was, okay, this seems real. But the bad news is we're not taught how to do this, how to interpret the new language that my loved one now speaks. And so that was the next part of the journey, right? Is trying to figure out, okay, how does this work and how does this work for me?
I think it's a skill we all have, but it's atrophied.
There you go. Great word.
Because of our society, we're so outwardly focused, materialistic. And one of the things you said before, I wanted to comment on. I always tell people, don't be a skeptic. Approach it with critical thinking and your intuition, because your intuition will tell you if something is not true.
But then learning to trust that is a really big step, I found as well. So what happened that you started to learn to trust beyond just the mountains of evidence that you read? Yeah. What did you experience?
Well, no, it was, I certainly read the evidence, but then I started to have my own experiences. And that's really, I went to 5 mediums. And those mediums, each of them with a different capacity, but each of them bringing through evidence that was undeniable and not Googleable, if you will. And so that it's almost like if you think about it like bricks that you're trying to get up over a wall of disbelief, each one of those pieces of evidence, each one of those experiences was another brick or another cinder block step to help me get up over that wall. And I had a reading with a particular medium, and she, at the end of the reading, I mean, she came up with where he died and how he died and that he used to live in France and all these things. And I asked her, okay, so you say it's learnable. How do I learn? She says meditation. And that was the hard, like, holy cow, now what do I do? But, the nutshell for me, for anyone, I do believe that whether you call it sitting in the power or whether you call it meditation, or I call it listening practice, whatever you call it, you just have to get quiet. If you and I, Sally, you and I, Gary, are sitting together and you're telling me something, I gotta be quiet. So I think that if we could demystify meditation and understand that it's just getting quiet and listening. And I hear people all the time say to me, I used to get signs and now I don't get signs anymore. And this is really important in my personal assessment. Do you still ask? We ask early on. And then at some point, it doesn't work to just sit on the couch and eat Doritos and hope that they're going to show up and give you a sign. Anytime on this side of the veil or that side of the veil, communication is always a two-way street. So are you engaging? And my strategy was I was going to give Scott the benefit of the doubt because I was learning a new language. So anything that happened, I was going to give him credit for. It was easier than trying to, okay, was that him? Was that my mom or my grandmother or me making it up in my head? I just decided he's going to get all the credit for now while I'm learning. So something cool happens. Thank you, Scott. And when people say I don't get signs, to me, that sounds like they're blaming their loved ones, right?
They're not going to just keep throwing signs at you because it's work for them to do that. I mean, if you ask, that's the key question. You have to ask. You're feeling kind of down, you missing somebody, ask them for a sign.
Yes.
And they do come.
Yeah. Well, and you make an important point, Gary. It's the asking if there's anything, if there was one sacrosanct rule in my mind, in my experience, is asking. And that's why prayer works. Prayer works because it's asking. So it's not, though, just asking. It's you ask and then your perception is that you don't get it. You don't get anything. Then there's another ask. And that is, okay, Scott, I'm sure that you're trying to communicate with me. I'm totally giving you the benefit of the doubt. Can you please help me to learn to recognize the signs that you're sending? So if you can't see the signs, at least ask for help recognizing the signs. Like, how else can you keep asking? Because asking equals engagement.
And so did you use particular tools to get you there? Did you just learn, about synchronicities and symbolism, or, what kinds of things helped you to notice the signs?
Yeah.
If there were things at all.
Yeah. No, there's a great question. And I think that we can not meditate. We cannot get quiet and listen and just watch life unfold and, catch what we catch. And that's certainly a strategy. But I saw benefit. So I was suffocating on my grief. And when this medium recommended that meditation was a way to hear from him, she recommended HemiSync, so binaural beat technology. I trust HemiSync, which is through the Monroe Institute. I trust their technology because if you think about it, they're creating an energetic sandwich. If you're going to eat that, if you're going to try to put that into your brain, you want to make sure that the people who made the sandwich have a clean kitchen, if we're sticking with the metaphor. So I trust the people who are constructing those meditative sandwiches, as it were. So that technology, to very much oversimplify, is just synchronizing the hemispheres of the brain, my terminology, not theirs. So if I can synchronize this radio antenna inside my head so that I have broader bandwidth, then I have a greater capacity potentially to receive information from Scott, from my mom, from my brother, from Nikola Tesla. It doesn't matter. The point is, if I'm a radio station and my bandwidth has gotten increased through using that technology, that was my strategy. And I've never really thought about this, guys, but here's sort of an A plus B that equals C that just occurred to me is one strategy is just walk through life, notice the butterflies and the dragonflies, whatever, the pennies on the street, which is great. But if I do a little bit of work, it doesn't have to be hours on end, but if I use that binaural beat technology, it's not just while I'm using it, I'm a bigger radio antenna. I believe that what's happening is an upregulation of my central nervous system. So that it's kind of like that old thing about once you stretch a mind to a new place, it won't go back to the old place. So I'm stretching my capacity in my listening practice, AKA meditation. And so then I go back to my life. I still have the increased capacity. The waistband of my mind has been stretched. So something else becomes possible. So my strategy was listening practice and then life practice, paying attention. And maybe everybody does this, guys. I don't have a lot of exposure to the outside world. I'm a relative hermit. So maybe everybody does this. So forgive me if it's overly obvious. But I basically, once I determined that this is real, that this after-death communication is possible, then I basically just adopted the strategy that Scott's here, giving him the benefit of the doubt, we're going to figure this thing out. So I walked with him every day. I wake up, I kiss his picture, I say, Scott, let's rock the day. And I make a request every single day, and this is what it is. Show me your presence in wondrous ways. It's a big ask. I want to ask big, right? So then I have all kinds of examples of the ways, I have great stories. And it wasn't just, like I said a minute ago, 1 story, 5 stories, 25 stories. It's 5,000 stories. It's 10,000 stories. It's like, and they're all, you can't make this stuff up kind of stories. So
Cheryl, obviously we don't have time for 10,000, though I could sit and listen to you all day. But could you share a couple that were really profound with us for the audience?
Yes. And the first one I want to share ties to the meditative process, the listening process. The simplicity, the simple breakdown of it is I've got my headphones on, I've got my hemi-sync, I'm imagining my radio station, getting my bandwidth increasing. And the guidance I received was always meditate with a notepad in my lap. And I'm listening and I'm hearing things. So I think that we've been taught, okay, meditation, you're supposed to still your mind. That's if you have a different intention. And I think I've talked with you guys about this before, but it's sort of A plus B equals C. A is the activity, the non-variable, that's meditation. B is what's your intention? My intention is to connect with Scott or anybody else who serves the light. And then C, the outcome, is driven by my intention. So I'm not trying to still my mind. I'm listening to what thoughts occur to me. And one really important point is I think that we don't understand that we can think a thought, but a non-local point of consciousness can push a thought into our conscious awareness. So I'm listening, I got my notepad, and I started meditating November 7th, 2017. This was probably February. And I was in so much pain, but I noticed when I was meditating, I wasn't in pain. So I was motivated to keep doing it. And I would hear things, and I didn't know what they were, so I'd just write them down. And then I would go and I would look up what's the spiritual meaning of a squid or a chocolate chip cookie. I don't know. I was just trying to figure it out. So it's February. I'm meditating, and the important backstory is when Scott passed, it was a Friday. On Monday, they had me bring his clothes to the funeral home. And they said, if you bring his clothes at 9 a.m. and then you come back at 2, you can be with him. we'll have him dressed or whatever. And so I went and I was with him that afternoon. That was a Monday, and they weren't going to like cremate him till the following Monday. So every day after work, I would go from 4 to 5, and I would sit there in the funeral home just because it was as close as I could get. And so I became friends with the funeral director. Her name's Bridget. And so she and I would talk. And one day I asked her, okay, so how do we know it's Scott that we get back when you give us the cremated remains? She goes, oh, there's a coin. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I deal with palliative care and hospice. I've never heard of a cremation coin. She goes, yeah, we never repeat a number. Everybody gets a coin. It goes through the flames. And when you get his cremains back, it'll be zip tied to the top. I'm thinking, what the heck are you talking about? I think I actually have, I have one here somewhere. But anyway, so I said, well, can I see his coin? And she says, sure. So she disappears back into the back of the funeral home somewhere. And it's taking a really long time. Like not a little bit of a time, but a really long time. I'm thinking, did she leave? Like, did she totally ditch me? But anyway, she finally comes out. She shows me the coin. I kiss the coin. I take a picture for Scott's dad, and she puts it away, whatever. So now fast forward to I've meditated. It's February, and I'm sitting there listening. And I think Scott and I have worked out a system where I know he's there. So he's there, and he shows me like a movie. He says, Bridget, that was her name. She dropped the coin that day, and it rolled under a piece of furniture. And then he shows me her splayed out on the floor to reach under the furniture to get the coin. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I totally just made that up. But then I thought, why would I make that up? Like, if there's a distinction, me, not me, it felt like not me. So I had become friends with Bridget, so I call her. And I say, okay, she knows I'm meditating and I've gone to some mediums, whatever. So I tell her, okay, Scott just did this drive-by, and he shows me that on that day, you dropped the coin and it rolled under a piece of furniture. And I told her the whole thing. She's dead silent on the phone. She goes, Cheryl, there was nobody there. You couldn't possibly know that. She said, do you remember how long it took me? I said, yes, I do. I thought you left. And she said, well, it's because when I was crawling on the floor to get the coin, my black clothes got covered in dust. And so when I stood up, I was dirty, and I couldn't come out and show you the coin being dirty, because then I would have to admit that I dropped the coin, and I was never going to tell you that I dropped the coin. So I had to clean myself up. So guys, though, that's me, not me. That's not me.
Yes, the validation is the key, isn't it? And the fact that you accepted that it was possible that maybe this wasn't me, and had the courage to go and ask, because that does make a world of difference in accepting all of this. Because I definitely had some similar experiences in my journey towards mediumship as well. And they're knock you on the floor kind of astounding types of things. So that's a great story.
When you have that kind of experience that's evidential like that, that begins to teach you how it feels different when they're coming through from a passing thought of your own. And
Yes.
you begin to recognize then that energy, I think. And something I want to stress, everybody can do this. This is not limited to a few special people that hang a sign out and call themselves mediums. It's an atrophied ability that I think everybody has in one form or another. You can contact your own loved ones. It may take a little effort. It may take some meditation. It may take quieting your mind. The monkey mind can get in the way.
Well, I think you make a really important point, Gary, that I want to emphasize. And I haven't talked with this. I've thought about this a lot. I haven't talked about it a lot. And that is, each of the three of us has been to a medium before, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
You go to a medium and you hopefully get some things you recognize, and you invariably get some things you don't recognize. And we've all had the experience where then you go home and an hour later or a day later or a week later, you go, oh my God, that's what that was. So we call that sort of mediumistic amnesia, right? But then there's the things that you never recognize. And what I want to propose is that spirit never wastes a thought. They have to push the information through the filter of the medium. But I don't really believe that there's such thing as a no. I think that there's yes and there's I don't know. And we don't maybe figure out the I don't knows. It's certainly possible that those I don't knows are an interloper. But I think that we too quickly say, oh, the medium got it wrong. As opposed to, can I unpack this? What in the heck is she talking about a blue Chevy or whatever it was that was a big fat no? I think that if we could stay in the what if place, what if these are something and I just don't know what they are yet, then we don't slam the door in the face of our loved ones who might make an attempt at helping us understand. I think that spirit is growing and getting smarter, just like hopefully we are over the last, millennia. And so can we give them the benefit of the doubt that this is something? It's like one of those Chinese boxes that you have to figure, a puzzle box, you have to figure out how to open it. But it's not nothing. And I would challenge people to don't assume it's nothing. Assume it's something and then ask them to help you figure it out.
I like what you said. Dr. David Hawkins, who did kinesiology, used to say the universe doesn't know. It's either a yes or a not yes.
Yes.
Because he did use kinesiology to question many things about the universe. But that's a very important point, and I heard you say that, brought that back to mind. So yes, the universe operates on a positive field. So
well, what about Gary? What about when we go to a medium and we get the yeses, let's say? Like, I know what that is. That's evidential. It's still, there might be more. If you have a lifetime with someone and you get evidence and they have a lifetime of evidence to choose from and they choose that evidence, could you give them the benefit of the doubt that I could now go home from the mediumship reading and do my homework and unpack whatever else might be there?
Yeah.
The analogy I always like to use is that mediumship is like playing charades. You get this information that's coming through, and I'm sure it's different for different mediums, but you try to convey what you receive. Sometimes you might, again, color it a little too much with your own filter, but if the base information is there, hopefully the person receiving the information will be able to, like you said, unpack it and make meaning out of it, or receive the meaning out of it. I don't even say that they have to make meaning, but they're able to be open
unearth
to
it.
Yes, the interpretation for it. So in fact, Gary and I were talking just before we got together here, and I was saying a lot of times for mediums, it's just about spitting out what comes to you, even if you have no clue where it's going. So what other things do you play with? I'm curious, because I know you like to explore and play.
I do. And I really, if you think about a sailboat and you get onto the sailboat and you raise the sails, we might think that we're raising the sails to move the boat. That's not totally accurate. You're raising the sails to put yourself in the way of the wind. And so I ask myself, how can I put myself in the way of the wind of my loved ones who are in spirit? So do I only expect the dragonfly? That's a pretty small sail. It's like the paper that a straw comes out of. That's about how wide that sail is, as opposed to what are all the different ways that I could make the sail bigger? I open books to random pages. Do I, ask for the lizard with lipstick on? I don't know. But then you're tired, but you can't go to sleep, and you're scrolling through Facebook, and there's the lizard with the lipstick on. You know what? just have fun. Fun is a better frequency than hope. Hope is a beggar. One day I have Scott's picture on top of the bookshelf, and I was walking by the bookshelf, and one of the books was stuck out in a wonky kind of way. I'm sort of OCD about everything being pushed in just so. So I went to push in the book, but I'm a good listener at this point, and I hear, pick the book and open it to any page. So I take the book off the shelf. I look at Scott's picture, and I said, Scott, do you have a message for me today? Close my eyes. I fill my heart up with love, and I open the book, and I kid you not, I look down at the page, and the phrase I land on is, yes, I do. Kind of a ballpark, it's like so freaking awesome. And I can't, so you have to forgive me, guys, because I forget which stories I've shared, so these might be repeat stories, but another, teach yourself to pay attention to nuance. The language of spirit is a nuanced language. And I think part of it is maybe just by construct it is, but I think on the other hand, they keep setting the bar a little bit higher to see if you're paying attention. Is she going to catch this? Right? So one day I left the house and I got in my car and I was driving to Walmart. And I pushed a CD into the player. Yes, I'm one of those people that still has a CD player in her car. And it's a CD that Scott gave me, Zac Brown Band. I know every song, every segue. I know all of the pauses. I know everything about these songs. I've listened to it 10 million times if I've listened to it once. So I'm singing along, and I said, okay, Scott, how about if today you find some really cool, interesting way to let me know you're here? So we're driving along singing, and I'm singing this song, and I get to Walmart, and I park, and I wait until there's a pause in the song, and I know what's coming next. I know the words. If I stayed in the car, I know what words I'm going to be singing next. And I turn off the car. I open my car door. Out of the back of Walmart, at that exact moment, is the song I was listening to, and it starts where it would have started if I had stayed in the car and sang the next lyrics. So nuanced, right? You have to sort of have spherical, what I call spherical awareness, so that you're paying attention all the time.
And there's no such thing as coincidence when you're communicating with spirit.
No, Sally, and I'm glad you brought that up, because words have power. And if you think about it, like, let's say witches cast spells, right? So, I mean, when I was a little girl, and you think abracadabra, alakazam, or open sesame, or whatever. And so one day I asked myself, okay, so why do we call it spelling words? And so then I thought, okay, what's a spell? A spell is a sequence of words that causes an effect. If I say to you, Sally, I love you, my friend, that casts a spell on you. If I say to Gary, Gary, I respect you so much and appreciate who you are in this world, that casts a spell on you. And there's certainly negative spells that we can cast. But it's so important to understand that words carry a frequency. They carry an energy, and that's why asking is important. The ask is a frequency that spirit understands. And if we don't ask and we just keep it in our heart, the example I like to use is, Sally, okay, I'm coming over to your house today. You don't know that I'm really, really hungry. And so you let me in, we hug, we sit down, and I don't tell you that I'm hungry. I have an intention that you're going to feed me. That's crap. I'm sorry. It doesn't empower you, and it doesn't give me what I want. Whereas because you're my friend, if I say, God, I'm starving, can I have a sandwich? You would say, of course.
Absolutely.
So we have to ask, and the ask has a frequency that those in spirit pick up on.
And you said something really important there too. we have to be really cautious of how we carry ourselves in the world, because we are doing that spelling on everybody we meet. Do we meet them with anger? Do we meet them because we're grumpy? Even that has an effect on everyone that you encounter. It's how we carry ourselves in our daily life, not just asking spirit for signs,
Yes.
but also how you are in the world. Very, very important.
Well, because it is your bandwidth, right? It's the signal that the radio station is sending out.
Sure.
It makes a difference.
It does.
And I think that it's physics. I know that we think of it as woo and abracadabra, and it's all this is magical. That wasn't going to work for me when Scott graduated. It needed to be, if it was provable, if it was real, it had to have some evidence that it was real. And that's what I went in search of. I didn't want to, I'm sorry, this might sound bad, but I didn't want to feel better because I was making something up in my head. If it wasn't real, then I was willing to figure that, learn to live with that. But if it was real, then there should be a mechanism of action, if that makes sense.
This is something that I often think about and maybe occasionally talk about as well. Is, we talked earlier about the word skepticism. And honestly, for me, skepticism has a different, I'm going to say frequency to it, because to me, skepticism is about discernment and being open-minded, because by definition, to be skeptical, you must also be open to the possibilities. Whereas cynicism is closing the door, right? And saying, this doesn't fit my worldview, it's not possible.
Yeah.
And that's when people really do lose the potential to experience, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So what other things have you used to create experience for yourself? Because I know that you do.
Yeah. So there's something in it. We won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but I do think that it's a fun thing that I can show you. Again, what if, right? Is it real? Is it not real? Are we meaning-making machines that read meaning into everything? Maybe. But at some point, something more is possible. And so what gematria is, and if you'll forgive my averted eyes, I want to make sure I read I have a definition I'm reading on the screen. It's pronounced gematria. And what gematria is a method of assigning a numeric value to each letter of a word, a name, an expression, and then ascertaining hidden meaning through the relationship between the numbers and the words. And I didn't know until this morning when I was reading a little bit of history that we didn't even have an alphabet, not counting cuneiform or hieroglyphics, but an actual written alphabet until about 1,000 years before Christ. So not all that long ago. And yet very early on, our ancestors figured out the numeric value between words and numbers. And so there's something, short of a very long story, there's something called gematria, and it was used by the Kabbalistic Jewish mystics and the ancient Greeks, where they would calculate the value of a word and then look within scripture and sacred texts to sort of unpack more meaning, which I think ties back to what we were just talking about, Sally, about, okay, we think we know what this is, but could we unpack it more? And so there's a calculator online, which will do the math for me because I'm not great at math. So I don't want to do the calculating of the numbers. I just want to basically look at this. I'm going to put in a word or a phrase. What other words and phrases come up? And I use that for spirit as a means of communicating with spirit. Maybe they can flash my lights. Maybe they can have the butterfly land on my arm. Maybe I can open the book to the random page. I've had one gematria scholar say to me, that's not what it's supposed to be used for. Well, that's not what books are supposed to be used for either. The author wrote the book so I would learn about biology, but I can still use it as an oracle. So I'm no harm, no foul here. It's just a tool I'm going to use. If I want to use my magic wand to dig a hole, I can. So taking that into account, if I can share my screen, I just want to show everybody the website. I made a list of some really cool examples of how it works. And the one caveat that I want to say is this is going to calculate all kinds of words and phrases that are in the database. Some of them are Obama eats worms or Trump is the devil's mistress, whatever. Ignore those things. Those aren't the things for you. But so one day I was meditating and I thought, okay, if I can talk to Scott or my mom, then I should be able to talk to anybody. So there's a medium in England called Magenta Pixie, which I always thought that was a stupid name, but I gave her a chance and I've learned a lot from her channeled transmissions. And she channels someone or a collective consciousness called the white-winged collective consciousness of 9. So one day I saw the book out of the corner of my eye, one of these channeled books. And I thought, okay, white-winged collective consciousness of 9, this is going on in my head, not out loud. How about if you meditate with me today? Why not? So I sit down, got my binaural beats on, I'm meditating, I'm listening, and I see a movie, and it isn't always in my mind like a movie, but this was like a movie. And so I'm walking down a street, like a busy street in New York or San Francisco, and I'm passing by a phone booth, and the phone starts to ring. And then they say, the white-winged collective consciousness of 9 says, step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone. Now I've got my notepad in my lap. I open my eyes. I start to write that down. Step into the phone booth and answer the ringing phone. And they corrected me. They said, no. Step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone. So I change it. Step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone. But the reason why, for me, the gematria is helpful is if I get step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone in my meditation, what do I do with that? It's not like a squid or a chocolate chip cookie or an avocado or the Eiffel Tower, and I can look up the spiritual meaning. It's a whole sentence. So this is a way to potentially access more information, right? So keep in mind, I asked the white-winged collective consciousness of 9 to meditate with me. At the end of every one of their channel transmissions, they say, we are the white-winged collective consciousness of 9. So I've already have it preloaded. Step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone, right? I'm going to calculate, and as you'll see, that's gematrix.org. It's a free website. So it calculates the numeric value. And I like this because they show you every single letter. So there's Hebrew, there's English, and there's simple. And it's different multiples of 10 for all intents and purposes. And simple is just 1 through 26. And you can find all kinds of information about the history of gematria. But there's step into the phone to answer the ringing phone. And then it's going to give me all these different words and phrases that also have the same numeric value, right? So I'm going to save us some time because as people, you see here it says that I could add this to the database. Because I haven't, but when you do, it pushes all the other results down. So the day that this happened 2 years ago, it was on the first page. Now it's on page 7. But I'm going to show you what happened. So I put in step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone. And above is Hebrew. Down here we've got Jewish and simple. I know because I looked last night. It's on page 7. So step into the phone booth to answer the ringing phone. And I just want you to know that when this happened, and you can do Control F, when this happened, I fell off my chair.
Don't you love those those
Yes.
experiences when they do happen?
Look at what came up.
We are the white-winged collective consciousness of 9. That's amazing.
Okay, I got chills.
Wait till you know about me. And I had to call anybody who would listen because I was just stammering. I was so in awe. Because it wasn't like you're talking with your friend about buying a new vacuum and then all of a sudden you have vacuum cleaners showing up on your Facebook page. I had the thought in my head, okay, White Wing Collective Consciousness of 9, will you meditate with me? They give me step into the phone booth, 2, answer the ringing phone, and I get this evidence.
Amazing.
Freaking out of
And
the ballpark.
and at the time on the first page where you found it quickly and easily.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's
so here's another example. I was doing a reading and I just experiment, right? So I was doing this reading for this woman called Carla. And Carla wanted to hear from her friend Jane. They'd been friends since they were born. When they were in their 50s, Jane died. Carla was 70 when she called me, and she wants to hear from Carla. So Carla shows up and talking about all the trouble and the shenanigans they got in when they were teenagers. And every Friday night, curlers in their hair, fuzzy slippers, bathrobe, bowl of Chex Mix, playing gin rummy. She goes, oh my God, every Friday night, that's what we did all through high school, gin rummy every Friday night. So Jane says to me, because they know I use the gematria, Jane says to me, put our names into the gematria. So I put in, and I knew what she meant, so I put it in, and now, again, there's all these results, but I looked last night, now it's on page 3. That day it was on page 1. Now if I go Control F, that's what came up.
Gin rummy.
In real time, in a reading, it happened. And the woman didn't know anything about the gematria, so I had to explain it to her to get to holy cow. So another example, I have a friend, Pete, and Pete was like a grandfather to me. He was the owner of Granny Goose potato chips in California. And I was missing Pete one day. And this is really an important lesson about paying attention spherically, 365 degrees to how spirit might send something. So I'm getting ready for work one day and I'm thinking of Pete and I'm saying, God, Pete, it's been too long. I really miss you. Could you send me a goose today? Just let me know you're around. Send me a goose. So I get out, have my cup of coffee, go out the back door, and there's a flock of geese flying over. And I said, it doesn't count. That's not fair. It's October. You don't get to just give me the flock of geese. That's lazy. No, I won't take it. Try again. So I'm driving to work and I'm just in that space of paying attention, whatever. I'm driving to work and this truck passes me, and I want to make sure I spell it right. SIRXH Farms. So I see this truck and I see SIRXH Farms, and somehow I know that that's important. I'm not even really thinking about Pete. I just know that it's important. So now, again, I looked last night because things get pushed down in the database. There was all kinds of things, but on the first page that day, now on page 4, that's what came up.
Wow.
Gray goose.
It's a wonderful way to sort of, when you get something and you don't know what to do with it, or let's say you got the great evidence and you want to unpack it and see what else. I'll give you a few other quick examples without looking it up. My dog, my beloved Shushu, passed away in January this year. And Shushu and his son had been together his son's entire life. So, 10 years. The dogs had really almost never been apart. So I call my girlfriend whose partner dog had just passed away. How is your other dog doing? And can you give me any advice? Shushu was, like Tonto's world. And so anyway, we talked. And then the next day, I'm in my meditation. I'm talking to Shushu. I'm just thanking him for being such a good dog. And I get a text during my meditation from my friend Louise. And Louise uses the gematria all the time. She's not thinking about my dog or me. She's doing a search. The search she did was Fibonacci hexahedron hydrogen. Something completely unrelated to me and my dog. And so she texts me and she says, I think I got a message from your dog. Go look up Fibonacci hexahedron hydrogen. And I just got to show this. I got to share the screen again, guys, because this is just too amazing. And I think visually it's really powerful. So I put in Fibonacci. There we go. Okay. So Fibonacci. Oh, come on. Fibonacci hexahedron hydrogen. And what page is it on? Page 3. Okay. So she said, just go look it up. And it was on the first page at that time. That's what came up.
Hi, my name is Shushu.
Oh,
I have been using the gematria for 4.5 years. And never have I seen that word is Chinese and it means uncle.
Amazing. Because I've never heard the name Shushu ever. That's really incredible. And the fact that it came from another source for you, it just adds to the level of planning that happens on that side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
they'll use any method they can to get through to us. And now when you do a reading for somebody, you're not generally using these tools that you're.
Generally not. But you know what, Gary? Sometimes spirit says, do this.
Uh-huh.
But it's not like with Carla and Jane, the woman didn't have any frame of reference. So I had to take time to then explain what it is. So no, generally not. But I think that as mediums, it's also another possibility. So I've started experimenting with, like, so let's say I'm going to do a reading for Sally. And let's say it's your grandfather I knew you wanted to hear from. So I might say, okay, Grandpa, what do you got for Sally? And then he might say spaghetti and meatballs. I don't know what to do with that. Maybe it's meaningful, but I also will go to gematria if that impulse is there, and I'll put in spaghetti and meatballs, and I will just scroll through, and he might say that one, that one, that one. And it's mostly N of 1. I'm just testing to see, and I'd say quite often the things that come out of the gematria end up being evidential, meaningful things. But it's a slippery slope because it takes time, so I don't do it in real time generally, but I'll experiment just to, like you said, Gary, they'll use whatever tool. And here's the thing, that if I can sort of put a bow on this, spirit teaches us, but we teach spirit. So what spirit knows about me is 100% of the time I will look things up. They know the tools that I can be counted on to use, and I won't assume it's nothing. So I've taught them. So we end up in this very fluid relationship, because they could even have me and Sally together. Sally doesn't know anything about the gematria, but they know I'll look stuff up. I can find it because they'll give it to me because they know I'll look it up.
Cheryl, this has been fascinating. We're going to have you back, because an hour is not enough time to explore some of these things. This has just been very fascinating, and we want to wish you a happy New Year, because we're coming up on New Year, and we hope to see you again very soon. If people want to get a reading from you, how long is your waiting list?
No, it's at this point over a year. So it's not the best strategy, but I think I'm going to be trying to do once a month for the next, during 2024, just a 3-hour tutorial. I think it'll end up being repetitive, but as new people come in, maybe that becomes meaningful. Okay. So I'm doing one on January 20th for 3 hours. It's $20. It's just, I feel like people should have a little skin in the game. So if you put down $20, I'll spend 3 hours with you, giving you some tips and pointers. And my website is quantumalchemy.world.
And we will also provide that in the notes.
The description, yes,
the description,
for the video.
That's the word I
yes,
was looking
we sure
for.
will.
Cheryl, thanks again for being with us today. This has been a lot of fun.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
We love you. Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.